My dead grandfather texted me, "Happy birthday." 3 weeks later, his twin sued us for the house. I thought my life was strange when my dead grandpa reappeared. Then we got a summons from a man I'd never met, his twin brother, claiming I'd manipulated him. What started as a family reunion turned into a courtroom war drenched in lies, betrayal, and a conspiracy so deep it nearly erased him forever. Before we get started, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Hi, I'm Jake, 32, and last month my life blew up when my dead grandfather texted me happy birthday and told me he was still alive. 3 weeks after I moved Grandpa into my apartment, we got a letter from a lawyer that didn't belong to either of us. At first, I thought it was junk mail. Then I saw the name on the envelope. Charles Hargrove, my grandfather's twin brother, a man I didn't even know existed. "Your brother?" I asked, holding up the envelope. Grandpa's face went stiff, the smile draining from his eyes like a tide pulling back. "He's dead to me," Grandpa said, his voice gravel hard. I opened the letter anyway. Curiosity overruled caution. It wasn't a letter. It was a summons. Charles Hargrove was suing Grandpa for control of the estate, claiming mental incompetence, alleging coercion, and asserting that I had manipulated him into signing everything over to me. "They're coming for the house again," I whispered. But Grandpa didn't flinch. He took the paper from me, scanned it, then set it down like it was just a grocery list. "He was always the snake in the garden," Grandpa muttered. "He'll twist the truth until it strangles you." I didn't understand how some long-lost uncle, or great-uncle technically, fit into this mess. But when I started digging, it got worse. Turns out, Charles had power of attorney over Grandpa before he'd died. He was the one who signed Grandpa into the nursing home. He was the one who signed the original will that left the house to the family. And here's the kicker. He was also the one who filed for Grandpa's death certificate. I felt the ground shift under me. This wasn't just fraud. This was collusion. 3 years of lies with Charles at the center. "They used me," Grandpa whispered, voice shaking for the first time in weeks. "Used me to play dead." And now, the man who helped fake Grandpa's death was suing us for the home we'd just reclaimed. The cherry on top? Court date, next month. This wasn't over. The first thing I did was find a lawyer who didn't flinch when I told him the words, "My dead grandfather is alive and being sued by the man who helped fake his death." I ended up in a downtown office that smelled like stale coffee and ambition. The lawyer's name was Madeline Hart, late 40s, sharp eyes, sharper voice. She'd read the summons twice before even speaking. "So let me get this straight," she said, tapping the edge of the paper like it insulted her. "Charles Hargrove, your grandfather's twin, filed for power of attorney years ago, had him declared mentally unfit, then had him die on paper, signed off on a will giving your family the inheritance, and now that you reversed all that, he's suing you?" "That's the summary," I said. She looked at Grandpa. "And you're competent, Mr. Hargrove?" Grandpa leaned in, eyes flinty. "Sharper than you, and I've got a better memory." Madeline smiled. "Good. I like a fighter." We went to work immediately. Madeline wanted everything: photos, medical records, witness testimonies. I called the nurse who'd let Grandpa borrow her phone. Her name was Kayla. When I told her what was happening, she said, "Good. That man was a snake, always calling the home like he owned it." "Charles?" "Yeah, told us to keep him sedated, said he'd get violent. But your grandpa, he was polite. A little confused sometimes, but never dangerous." I asked if she'd testify. She didn't hesitate. That night I found Grandpa standing by the window, staring out at the city lights like they were memories. "He tried to steal everything I built," he said quietly. "But not just for him. For your parents. For Sarah. They all thought if I disappeared, they'd win." "They almost did," I admitted. "Why didn't you ever tell me about Charles?" He sighed. "We used to be close, until the money got involved. He always thought I owed him something, said I got the better end of everything, Better house, better wife, better kid. Dad? He nodded. Charles resented me for years. When your father needed money, Charles saw an opportunity, said he could fix things, make me disappear so the family could move on. Clean slate, he said. Turns out he meant empty safe. The next week was a blur. I spent hours scanning documents, labeling folders, uploading backups. Kayla sent over statements, and Madeline filed for a preliminary hearing. But the moment that hit hardest was when I found the first will, the real one. Grandpa had written it 2 months before his supposed death. Dated, signed, notarized. And it had one beneficiary. Me. Not my dad, not my mom, not Sarah, just me. I showed Grandpa. He stared at it like it was a ghost. I wrote that when I realized none of them were going to change. I just never got the chance to deliver it. Because they put you in the home, I said quietly. He nodded. Madeline was thrilled. This changes everything. If we can prove Charles used fraudulent power of attorney, everything else crumbles. But we'll need to corner him in court. Pressure him. Let him make the mistake. 2 nights before the hearing, we got a package on our doorstep. No return address. Inside was a VHS tape. Yes, an actual VHS. I dug out an old player from the back of Grandpa's closet, don't ask me why he still had one, and popped it in. The tape was grainy, time-stamped 4 years ago. The camera pointed at a kitchen table. My dad, Mom, Charles, and Sarah sat together. There was a bottle of wine, laughter, and then Charles's voice. Once we filed the death certificate, it's done. He won't even know what hit him. Your old man will be a ghost by Christmas. Then Mom. And what about the house? Charles. Easy. I sign his power of attorney. We sell it fast, split the cash. If the kid asks questions, we'll say it was all Grandpa's wish. Dad laughed. That little martyr? He won't say a word. Sarah raised her glass. To family. The tape ended. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Grandpa's face was unreadable. Who sent this? I asked. He shook his head. Someone with a conscience. We made a dozen copies. Charles didn't know it yet, but he'd handed us the knife, and we were done being stabbed. The courtroom was quiet. Not solemn quiet, dangerous quiet. The kind of silence that waits for someone to say the wrong thing so it can pounce. I sat beside Madeline at the long polished table. Grandpa was behind us in the gallery, hands folded, eyes alert. Across the aisle sat Charles Hargrove, my great-uncle, smug in a tailored suit that didn't quite fit his neck anymore. He had 2 lawyers with him. One of them kept glancing at us like we were hiding a bomb. He wasn't wrong. Let him speak first, Madeline whispered to me. The more rope, the better. The judge entered. This is a competency hearing regarding Charles Hargrove's petition to invalidate the transfer of estate from the late Mr. Harold Hargrove, allegedly deceased at the time of said transfer, but later found to be alive. Representing the estate is, Your Honor. Charles's lawyer jumped in, standing way too fast. We'd like to begin by submitting medical evidence that Mr. Hargrove, Mr. Harold Hargrove, is unfit to manage his own affairs. We believe the respondents here have taken advantage of an elderly man suffering cognitive decline, and— Excuse me, Grandpa's voice rang out from the gallery. Are you talking about me? The judge raised an eyebrow. Mr. Hargrove, please remain seated unless called. Grandpa grunted, but sat. The lawyer cleared his throat. Right. We believe this case demonstrates elder fraud, undue influence, and a misallocation of assets by the defendant, Jake Hargrove. He said my name like I was gum stuck to his shoe. They presented some documents, old medical records, a dated statement from a shady neurologist, and a list of concerning behaviors that included things like believing he was not deceased. Madeline didn't blink. She let them pile it on. Then she stood. Your Honor, we'd like to call our first witness, Kayla Morrison. The nurse walked in, cool and calm, ponytail tight, scrubs neat. She was the picture of credibility. Her voice was soft but firm. Yes, I cared for Mr. Hargrove. Yes, I spoke with him often. No, he was not delusional. Yes, he asked for help. No, the nursing home had no right to keep him sedated. Yes, Charles Hargrove called regularly. No, he never once asked about Harold's well-being, only whether the staff had access to his bank account. Charles's lawyer objected. The judge overruled. Kayla smiled at Charles on her way out. Then came the bomb. Madeline stood again. Your Honor, with permission, we'd like to submit video evidence, anonymously received, which we believe directly supports our claim of conspiracy and fraud. Charles's face twitched. We wheeled in the screen. Hit play. The grainy footage flickered to life. My father, mother, Sarah, and Charles, front and center. He won't even know what hit him, he'd said. We'll say it was Grandpa's wish. The courtroom didn't gasp, but only because it was too stunned to breathe. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Mr. Hargrove, Charles, how do you explain this recording? Charles stood slowly. That video is a fake. It's been manipulated, deep-faked. I don't even remember that night. Madeline cocked her head. Funny. You seem to remember it just enough to deny it happened. Then she called me to the stand. I walked up, hands steady. The oath felt heavier than it should have. But I told the truth. I told them about the message I received on my birthday, the trip to the nursing home, the moment I found out my grandfather was still alive. I told them everything. And then Madeline asked me one question. Jake, why didn't you report this sooner? I looked right at Charles. Because I thought family meant something. I thought if I just kept helping them, they'd start seeing me as one of them. But they didn't want a family. They wanted a fortune. There was no applause, no dramatic music. Just silence. Then the judge turned to Charles. I've heard enough. Charles's smirk was gone. He looked like a man who just realized the ceiling was collapsing. The judge continued. This court finds no evidence of incompetency. In fact, it finds credible and overwhelming evidence of fraud committed by Charles Hargrove, alongside complicit parties named in the recording. Then she looked at me. The estate remains with the original beneficiary, Mr. Jake Hargrove. This hearing is adjourned. Her gavel cracked the silence like a gunshot. Outside the courtroom, Charles was already yelling at someone on the phone. His voice was high and desperate. Sarah stormed past me without a word. My mother sat on a bench, mascara streaked, quietly sobbing. My father didn't show up at all. But none of that mattered, because when Grandpa walked up to me, he didn't say thank you. He said, let's go home. And for the first time in my life, I finally knew where that was. Home looked different after court. Not in the way that paint or furniture changes a place, but in the way a wound starts to scab over. The silence in the house felt earned now. Peaceful. No longer the hush of buried secrets, but the quiet of healing. Grandpa moved easier. Not fast. His knees were still traitors, but with purpose. He started gardening out back, carefully tending to the roses we'd planted just days before the trial. Each morning, I'd find him out there, whispering to the petals like they were old friends. We didn't talk much about Charles after that. Not directly. Once, while we were drinking coffee, Grandpa said he always thought money was a shortcut to respect, but you can't buy what you never learned to earn. I just nodded. There wasn't much else to say. Then, one afternoon, I got an email. It was from Sarah. The subject line, "We need to talk." I stared at it for a solid 5 minutes before opening it. The message was short. No apology, no admission, just a time and place. Tomorrow, 4 p.m., a cafe halfway between our worlds. Are you going? Grandpa asked, already knowing the answer. I think I have to, I said, if only to see what story they're spinning now. The next day, I showed up early. The cafe was quiet, the kind with mismatched mugs and handwritten signs about locally sourced beans. I picked a table near the window. I wanted to see her coming. Sarah walked in at 3:58. She looked different, less polished, more human. Her hair was tied up messily, her clothes more practical than performative. She spotted me, hesitated, then walked over. "Jake," she said, sitting across from me. "Sarah." We stared at each other for a moment. Neither of us reached for the menu. She started, "Mom's not doing well. She's not herself." "She was never herself," I said evenly. "Only whoever the lie needed her to be." Sarah flinched but didn't argue. "Dad won't speak to anyone. And Charles, he's gone, disappeared. No one knows where he is." I sipped my coffee. "I'm not here to beg," she added quickly. "I know we screwed up, but I thought maybe you'd want to know." "Know what?" She leaned in, lowering her voice. "There's something else. Something even Grandpa doesn't know." My stomach tightened. She reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. "What is it?" She slid it across the table. "Proof about what they really did. Not just the money, not just Grandpa. Something worse." I didn't touch it yet. "Why are you giving me this?" I asked. "Because I'm tired," she whispered. "Tired of lies, tired of pretending we're not monsters." She stood. "Do what you want with it, but don't let them get away with it. Not again." And just like that, she walked out. I stared at the flash drive sitting between the salt and sugar packets. Something worse. Whatever it was in my hands now. And part of me wished I could just throw it away. But I knew I wouldn't. I waited until Grandpa went to bed before I plugged in the flash drive. I don't know why. Maybe I didn't want him to see my face if what I found broke something inside me. Maybe I didn't want to see his. The folder was titled simply, Truth Part 2. Inside were 4 files, 2 scanned documents, 1 video, and a zip folder labeled Records 2017. I opened the video first. It was security camera footage. Grainy, low resolution, dated 4 years ago. The angle showed a hospital hallway. My dad was pacing, checking over his shoulder like he was waiting for someone. Then, Charles walked into frame. They didn't see the camera. Dad spoke first. The audio was muffled, but there were captions. Someone had transcribed the whole thing. "If he gets out of this, he'll rewrite the will." "He won't," Charles replied. "The sedatives will make sure of that. You want peace, right? You want security? Then stop hesitating. He's still my father, and he's a threat to your future. You said it yourself." The video ended with them both walking into a room. The timestamp stopped there. I opened the documents next. One was a medical chart, flagged urgent. It detailed Grandpa's sudden decline in cognition, noting abnormal doses of medication inconsistent with his prior care. Dosages high enough to cause confusion, memory issues, sedation. The second document? An internal memo from the nursing home addressed to Charles, confirming payment for increased pharmaceutical intervention and requesting clarification on why the patient hadn't been formally declared terminal. It was dated a week before Grandpa's death. I sat frozen, bile rising in my throat. They hadn't just hidden him away. They'd tried to erase him, slowly, quietly, chemically. I opened the final zip file. Emails, dozens of them. Correspondence between Charles, my dad, my mom. Trading updates about Grandpa's condition, banking arrangements, and legal maneuvering. There was one email that stopped me cold, from my mother. "Can't we just increase the dosage? He's barely lucid now. A clean end would save everyone trouble. Please talk to Charles. He'll know how to handle it." A clean end. They weren't just content with stealing from him. They were trying to kill him. I sat back in my chair, the screen burning in my eyes. My hands trembled, but I copied every file, every document, backed them up 3 different ways. My skin felt cold, my mind spinning. But there was one thing I knew with absolute certainty. This wasn't just family betrayal. It was attempted murder, and I was done waiting for justice. I got up, walked down the hall, and stood in Grandpa's doorway. He was asleep, peaceful, blankets pulled up to his chest. He had no idea. I shut the door softly and went back to my laptop. Opened a new email. Addressed it to Madeline. Subject, urgent. We need to go further. Attached everything. Let them come. This time, I wasn't just taking them down. I was going to bury them. Madeline called me at 6:03 a.m. I saw the files, she said. No hello. You realize this isn't just fraud now. It's criminal. It's attempted homicide. I know. You ready for what that means? I looked out the window. The sky was gray, clouds dragging like bruises. More than ever. By noon, she'd filed a report with the state attorney. By evening, an investigator contacted me, asking for sworn statements. They were building a case, slow, methodical, but steady. The kind of case that ends in handcuffs. 2 days later, the first warrant was issued. Not for Charles, for my mother, the one who'd suggested the clean end. She was arrested quietly. No drama, no news vans. But I saw the photo they took, her mugshot, hollow, gaunt. A woman realizing the walls had finally closed in. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel guilt. Just relief. Dad went into hiding. Charles was still off grid. Sarah. She sent one last message. I didn't know how far they were willing to go. I'm sorry. For everything. I didn't respond, because sorry wasn't enough anymore. Grandpa took it harder than I expected. He didn't cry, but something inside him dimmed when I told him about the dosage, the emails. They would have watched me die, he whispered, staring out at the roses, and said it was natural. I didn't know what to say, so I just sat with him. We didn't talk again until sunset. You think they'll find Charles? I asked. Grandpa nodded slowly. Men like him always think they're smarter than the storm, but even snakes leave trails. He wasn't wrong. That night, a new tip came in. Someone had spotted Charles crossing into Canada using a fake ID. A warrant went international. His time was running out, but mine was just beginning. They caught Charles 12 days later in a motel outside Vancouver, hiding under the name Glenn Carter, living off prepaid cards and lies. The extradition process was swift. Turns out, international fraud and conspiracy to commit elder abuse don't go over well in either country. The trial that followed wasn't publicized, but it didn't need to be. The evidence was overwhelming. Emails, medical records, that damning video, and most of all, Grandpa himself. Standing tall in court, cane in one hand, fire in his voice. My own blood tried to erase me, he told the judge, but my grandson brought me back. Charles was sentenced to 15 years without parole. My mother got 5, reduced with a plea deal. Dad, found and arrested mid-escape attempt, got 8. Sarah was never charged. She testified. That was her penance. When the sentencing was over, Grandpa and I stood outside the courthouse in the cold. It's over, I said. He didn't smile, just breathed deeply. No, but it's quiet now. And that's something. Back home, we planted more roses. Red, white, yellow. A whole wall of color stretching across the yard. Neighbors waved more now. People dropped off food, offered kind words, told Grandpa he was a miracle. He just chuckled and told them he was too stubborn to die. One morning, months later, I found a letter in the mailbox, no return address. Inside was a check. The amount? Exactly what they stole. The note was one line, typed. Use it better than we ever did. No signature, I burned it. We didn't need their money. We already had everything they never understood. Peace, a home, and a truth they couldn't kill. Grandpa looked over from the garden that evening and asked, "Still think birthdays are cursed?" I laughed. Not anymore. He grinned, wiping his hands on his jeans. Then happy birthday, kid. Let's live a little. And we did.